Good morning, everybody. Tim Backstrom, who is joining us live from Poland, is our very special guest today, Wednesday, May 18th, 2022. For Kirk Anderson and DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and welcome to this very special episode of DrydenWire Live. Kim is here to share her story of being on the Polish-Ukrainian border, helping refugees fleeing the war, and sharing her story of faith. Yes, you heard me right. The topic of God will likely be discussed on today's show. So if that somehow offends you, you might want to stop watching now or stick around. You might learn something. With that being said, Kim, good morning. Thanks for being on.
Good morning.
Or is it what time is it where you are?
It's actually 3:30 in the afternoon, so
good afternoon. Well, good afternoon then. I can't wait. I know that Kirk has set this up. He messaged me like a week or two ago and said, I got a great idea for a guest. We have to have this person on. I didn't ask Kirk, so when Kirk said something, I just say, okay. So I didn't ask a lot, so I don't know much about you at all, so I can't wait to learn about you. But first, Kirk, how did this all come to be?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ben, for allowing us to have Kim on your show and tell her story. Kim and I actually went to college together, and as a lot of people that went to college together, we're Facebook friends and have tried to stay connected a little bit through there. However, she moved to Poland, and so I would just see posts every once in a while. When the Ukrainian war with Russia kicked off, there was a Facebook group that was created by Kim and I think it's run by her sister. And I was invited to be a part of that. And so I've just been following along with her journey on the Ukrainian border and just learning so much about what's going on and how it's affecting the Ukrainian refugees that are coming over to Poland and then going throughout the European and parts of Canada and things like that. So I reached out to her to say, hey, can you tell us more about that? Because the news goes in cycles in America and we don't always hear about everything. And particularly the human costs and the way it affects people personally is something that is near and dear to my heart. So I invited her on. We've been friends since 1999 when I graduated college, and we worked together a little bit. And so, Kim, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to hear about what's going on. First off, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at and how you got there from going over as like a short-term missions project to now living in Poland full-time?
Yeah, so I'm excited to be on here as well. It's just been super crazy to see all the different ways how God has opened up doors and different interviews and whatnot. So I'm super excited to share. And so I am currently in a town called Gliwice, Poland. So it's in the southern part of Poland. It's west of Krakow, about an hour and a half. And there's a big city called Katowice. And so I'm about 30 minutes west of there. And I did not plan on being in Poland at all. Like, I'm from North Dakota. I'm a farm kid. Grew up in a small town of, 300, 400 people, something like that, and played basketball. And my dad was a farmer, so I grew up walking around or driving tractors, and I loved farming. And but I went to Northwestern college, and I ended up what I wanted to do after college is I just wanted to go back home to farm. And so there was no degree that really fit me. I'm just like, I kind of like, teenagers, so I'll do youth ministry. So that's kind of what I decided to do. And while I was there at Northwestern there, every year they would have missions trips to different parts of the world. And I never really wanted to go on a missions trip, but I kind of felt guilty.
Why does that, can I interrupt? Why?
Yeah.
Why did you? What was it? Was it a stigma or something about missions trips that it just you kind of shied away from?
I don't even know. I think it was simply because I'm from North Dakota and really didn't have any desire to travel overseas or
Sure.
anything like that. I don't know. It was just never something that I really wanted to do. And I always remember at Bible camp is I would whenever there was missionaries or stories, they're talking about different things you can do. You can go, or you could give, or you can pray. And I was always like, Lord, I don't want to go. Like I can pray.
And I could do that from home. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but anyway, I finally signed up, and like my motivation wasn't the best because it was like literally, I'm gonna go so I can check off the box of I went on a missions trip.
Yeah, there, God, you happy? Jeepers, I went.
Exactly, exactly. And I actually signed up to go to Ireland. I didn't sign up to go to Poland. Poland was not an option. But then our leader, Dr. Martin, he said, like, hey, the trip's canceled, but we can go to Poland instead. I'm like, Poland? Like, who cares about Poland? I don't want to go to Poland.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, come on, it's going to be a great trip. We're going to go to this Bible camp. We're going to be able to share your testimony. It's great. Think Poland. And so I was with my friend, and because we were going to go together, and we're just like, where's Poland? Like, we knew it was somewhere in Europe, but we didn't know where. And so anyway, that was back in 2001. And on that trip, God touched my heart, and I can't even describe it, other than I just fell in love with Poland, and there was just this desire to be there and to help and to serve, and it's something that to this day I can't get rid of, and I just see it as God's way of directing me and being like, hey, this is where I want you to be. And
Isn't that the worst? Right? When he,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be here, but that he wants me here, and it's really, you couldn't pick the Bahamas. I could do missions there.
Wouldn't that be nice?
It's true, but at the same point, like, I love being here. I absolutely love being in Poland. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy at all living in a foreign country and learning Polish and all that fun stuff. But I see, like, it's been great, and then that's just almost like a confirmation for me of like, this is where God wants me to be. So
Kim, you've been there on and off from 2001. When did you make the leap to making Poland more of a home than North Dakota? Because right now you said that you were coming home maybe once a year. When was that transition that you really felt like Poland could be home for you?
Yeah, so it's kind of like three phases. Like the first phase was about from 2001 to 2007, where I would just go on like a 1 week trip, going to a Bible camp, like a missions trip type deal. And then the next phase was like, I need to check this thing out a little bit more. Is this just a 2 week, 1 week high, or is there actually something more with Poland? And so I went for 3 months, and that started from 2008 to 2012. And so then during those years, I was bouncing back and forth. So I was still farming. I did go back home. I did farm. My dad and I, we started a business as well, like working with farmers. And that is my current job right now, is making maps for farmers. And so
like most of the world is remote working. You're really remote working.
Yeah,
you're working.
I am.
Yeah. When you told me that you were going to go home to relax, I didn't realize it was home. You're home in Poland. I thought, oh, she'll be in North Dakota. That's what I told Ben, and Ben's like, oh yeah, we're going to talk to her in North Dakota. But you're working from Poland and doing everything remote with your dad and your business in North Dakota. What a cool opportunity.
Yeah, it's super cool. So to actually answer your original question, it was 2013 when I finally said, I'm done. Like, I can't be bouncing back and forth, living in two different cultures all the time. Like, that's just really hard. And so then it was 2013, and that's when I decided, like, I need to learn Polish. And so I more or less have been in Poland all the time, but there's been multiple times where I've gone back to North Dakota. Usually it's around Christmas time. I'm home for about a month and a half to visit friends and family. Sometimes I've come in the summertime as well. So just kind of depends on.
So in 2013, that was a year before Russia's first kind of move into, wasn't it 2014 that they started attacking, and parts of Ukraine were in battle for the last, since 2014. Did you think much about that being in Poland, or was that pretty far removed?
Yeah, it was really far removed. Like it was only, I forget what year it was. It was probably within the last 3 to 4, maybe 5 years, when there was more Ukrainians that were coming to Poland. And like I knew that something was happening with, I think it's what, Crimea or whatever. I don't even remember how to pronounce that. Like I knew, okay, but it was a long ways away.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I didn't, I didn't really think about it. I'm like, oh, it doesn't touch me. It's on the other side of Ukraine, so no big deal.
Right. But, like Ukraine's a big country, but in terms of like the United States, I'm in Wisconsin. That would kind of maybe be like Arizona's in a war or something. I mean, it's probably bigger than that. But in terms of like, it was kind of off the radar. I didn't really think about it much. It's just Arizona, it's so European to like have these conflicts so close. You're literally so close to Ukraine. Now you were 6 hours is your home, where you live. You chose to go to the border and work with a church there. When did you decide to do that? Were you working up to that as the rumors of war started coming, or is that something that you did after the war started and you saw the need?
Yeah, so it was actually after, because honestly, before the war was starting and actually day one of the war, I was already in my mind thinking I probably need to buy a one-way ticket, and I was already thinking, okay, what stuff do I need to take home with me? Like maybe, because like in my mind, and also like here's the thing is I was having to go. I was supposed to go home in like April to help out with spring soil testing, because we're short staffed. So we're short one person. And so I was like, this is not an ideal situation to have me go back and soil test because I have to do all the mapping. And so I already was like planning on going back to North Dakota in the spring. And so like when all the stuff of like the war starting, like, oh, it's probably going to happen, it's probably going to start, I was just like, maybe I just ought to go back to North Dakota for a while and just wait.
Yeah, because that would be the logical and rational thing to do.
Exactly, like why stick around?
No kidding.
And for me, like I have listened to and watched a lot of like World War II history, and I've been over the 10, 20 years that I've been in Poland. I've been to Auschwitz like 8 times, and which is not like oh well, I'm going to Auschwitz.
Oh, right.
But even with my dad at Christmas time, Dad and I had watched, because I was home at Christmas, and we had watched. There's a World War II in color documentary on Netflix.
I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
It's excellent.
So
I highly recommend it. And so I had just watched that, and so in my mind, I'm just like, if war breaks out in Ukraine, it's like World War II all over again. Like Russia's going to just plow over Ukraine in a couple of days. Poland's next. Like Putin's already been saying for months that he's, like mourning that the Soviet Union is no longer the way it was. And, he wants all these countries back. And that means Poland. And so I was just like, in a month, Poland's, it's like March, war's going to be here in Poland in March. So I was really freaked out. And so day one of the war, it was just like, oh my goodness, like, I saw the map and like artillery rockets are being, all of Ukraine was being shelled, all of Ukraine. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And
I made a terrible choice. I should have
left. Yeah. And so I was just like, do I leave? Do I not leave? Like, what do I do? And then on day 2 of the war is when everything changed for me. I had a conversation with a friend, and I think he's a Canadian missionary. And so I called him. I'm like, what do you do as a foreigner? Like, do we stay? Do we leave? Like, what do we do? And then he had said, he's like, Kim, the church, the body of Christ in Poland has such an awesome opportunity, because refugees are going to be coming here. Like, we need to help. And I didn't even think about that, and wow. as Americans, war is so far removed from us. We have no idea what it means. And we have you hear like, oh, there's refugees fleeing from Syria or whatever country. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does the logistics mean? Like, exactly,
right?
you know, and so like I had no idea even what that meant. And and so I was just like, oh, yeah, you know, but then I was like, well, how do I help? Like I'm 6 hours from the border, you know, like what can I do? And then another friend texted a little bit later saying, hey, at 6:30 tonight, so this is Friday, February 25th, 6:30 tonight, we're gonna have a prayer meeting for whoever wants to come to pray for the Ukraine war. And I was like, it was at my friend's house, which is like 10-minute walk away, and I'm like, I'll be there. And so as we were there, then the one guy who organized it, there's about 5 of us that were there, he said, hey, we got to pray real quick because I'm probably leaving within an hour to drive to the border because we're picking up refugees. Because my house church here in Gliwice has a partnership with a church in Ukraine, and they've worked together for years. And so that church had contacted our guys and said, hey, we are sending a group of people over. Can you pick them up and can you find homes for them to stay in?
Wow.
And so this is like 7 o'clock at night. It's a Friday night, and my friend is tired. Like, and it's a 6 hour drive, and we didn't know what time. He didn't know what time when he was going to be leaving. And so as we were talking, you know, we're just like, "Hey, you guys probably should have two drivers, you know, because you're going to drive. You're going to get there at 2 or 3 in the morning, and like you have no idea when they're going to cross, and then you're going to need to drive back another 6 hours." And so then I was just like, I guess I was just going to work tomorrow for a couple hours. I guess I can drive, you know.
Oh, you're crazy.
And
So
so
you
I
went with.
drove. I went with. I drove actually, you know,
Oh
because I was
my.
just like, I'm like Simon. I'm just totally wired. Like I got so much adrenaline pumping through me right now. Like you sleep, boom, I'll drive.
Wow.
And so yeah, we got there. We arrived about 2 o'clock in the morning. We were at a parking lot. It was nuts. It was nuts. Like as I'm and like and so we went to the border very close to Hrubieszów, and my dad calls it the H town because it's really hard to pronounce. And so we were at the border crossing like 30 minutes south of there. And as we were waiting, and so like in that area of Poland is like it's like small. It's like country, like Minnesota country. It's Wisconsin country. So like not a lot, really small towns. And as I was driving at like midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, I was just like, there's a lot of traffic for 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what? I mean, is this all because are they all going to the border? Are they all coming from the border? I'm like, what is going on?
Hmm.
And and what it was is like everybody's driving the border to pick up people
Yeah.
and we because there's like four cars total going to be coming, and when we got there we were all going to meet at the grocery store parking lot in this really tiny town. As I drove in, like I said to my friend, I'm like, Simon, look, it's full. The parking lot is full at 2 o'clock in the morning because we're only like 3 miles from the border. and
Wow.
and so that's exactly what was happening. Like, all these people were just coming across, and people were meeting them, and it was crazy. It was crazy.
So Kim, you've been over there now. You moved closer to the border, and I think you had told me before that you were about 10. Was it 10 miles or 10 minutes from
hmm
the border?
It's probably about 10 miles, maybe. I mean, it takes like to get to the actual border crossing. It's about a 20-minute drive.
Okay.
Because you can't, but the border is actually much closer. If you just go straight, you're right there. But like the road goes around, so.
So a border is important if you're, we won't get into politics, but borders are important. And
Mhm.
that border kind of gives you a sense maybe of security that Russia is attacking on that side of the street. But over here, we should be relatively safe. And yet we're seeing all these floods of refugees coming across. How safe do you feel where you're currently at? And is there any danger to you or the people that are crossing?
Yeah, I mean, like I feel safe. Like I've never felt unsafe. Like obviously, we all know that all of Russia's rockets can hit. They can hit Poland at any time. Like they've got troops in Belarus. Belarus borders Ukraine, borders Poland.
Hmm.
And when I am at the border, I do know that there was like some Belarusian troops started gathering on the Belarus Ukraine border again, and so like it's literally like a 2 hour drive, and they're there to where we are, you
So
know. So like at any moment, their planes can be in
sure.
Poland in like just a few minutes. So
So when you pick them up, right? That's what you're doing. You're there.
sort of,
Okay, yeah. So walk us through that. Is it
yeah.
all right? So I'm down here at the border, or I'm at a parking lot, and I see a bunch of people, and it's like, all right, come with us. Is that how it works? And if so, then where do they go? Then what?
Yeah, so lots of things have changed, and so I'll kind of tell you what we were doing because it's completely different than the beginning of the war. So in the very beginning, like there was just tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border, and I think March 4th was the peak, and there was 142,000 refugees that crossed in one day into Poland, and Poland has 6 border crossings, and in Hrubieszów, there's 2 border crossings like within a 30-minute drive from us. And so the church in Hrubieszów, it's a super small church. It's like 30 people is the size of the congregation, and like at least 10 of them are elderly. Let's just say that they're retired.
Sure.
And then there's at least 10 that are all children. And so there's probably about 10 people that are,
And then there's you.
know, yeah, there's our age. And then I'm added, like it's not even my church, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, kind of what it looked like in the beginning of the war was basically people were driving to the border. There was centers that started up. There has not been one refugee camp. There is not a refugee camp in Poland at all, which is awesome. Like the Polish people are phenomenal. Like they have completely opened up their homes. They've opened up sports centers. They have driven people in cars. Like it's amazing. And like even the Polish people are shocked. Like they're like, some of my friends are like, we can't believe we're doing this, you know? And so what it looked like is like people would go to the border, and then they'd have like a center set up. And then so they would just be busing people from the border to the center and back and forth. And then the church got set up to say, because they had to have a certain van or a bigger vehicle to enter in. Just, not anybody could go in, which was good because, you know, human trafficking could have been, you know, crazy.
Right.
So
That's
like
a whole other question about that, yeah.
Right, yeah. So like the Polish government, because in the beginning, we drove on day 2 of the war. We drove actually to the border. And then like the week later, within a week, they're realizing like, whoa, we've got to get some security in here. And so that only, I think, registered vans were allowed to go to the border to pick up people. And then they would take them all to a center. And so in Hrubieszów, there was like their sports center, basically their gym, their local big, huge gym was turned into a refugee center. And so they had 300 mattresses on the floor, or like beds, and then that was a place where the people could register, and then they could look for transportation. And so what it was is, so then if you wanted to be a driver, you know, you would just drive there to the center and just say, I'm going to this part of Poland. Does anybody need a ride? And there'd be people, you know, holding signs up with, you know, like Katowice or Warsaw or wherever, you know. So like it was just a matter of communication. Be like, okay, I'm going here. How many people are with you? 5 people, 2 adults, 3 kids. Boom, let's go. Right. And so that was all in the beginning, and it was like totally chaotic and crazy, and people, you know, like, and so I got back to the church on March, I forget what day it was, exactly a week after the war started, because I went home because I drove. We actually waited on the border for 2 days for this group of people to come. These 20 people that were coming, the Ukrainians that were coming, they sat on the border for 48 hours just to cross. The line was so long, like there was a 10-kilometer line of cars. So for 2 days, there's no restaurants, there's no gas stations, there's no nothing. It's a field. No toilets, no porta potties set up, like nothing. You know, so and yeah, so like I went home, and actually I ended up having a Ukrainian come with me, totally unplanned. Like she was supposed to go someplace else, but then because of the 2-day delay, her dad couldn't pick her up. and so she ended up with me. And so then it was later when I texted, because when we were there the first 3 days, 2 days of the war, like there was nothing happening, like literally
Yeah.
nothing was happening at the church. But then we went back a week later, and then that's when everything was pretty crazy. So basically, what we did as a church is we would pick people up, and we would say, we have space for 20 to 25 people. Do you want to come to the church? And we will give you a hot shower, food, a mattress to sleep on, a blanket, and we'll help you go wherever you need to go. And so then people would come. And in the first few weeks of the war, it was literally in, out, in, out, in, out. 20 people in, boom, next day gone. They go to the border in the evening, boom, they get some more. And then, and then a lot of the people in the first few weeks of the war, they all knew where to go. They all had contacts, either in Poland, relatives, friends.
Okay. So they basically just stay. So this is what you're talking about is the first part of the war, and you haven't gotten to the second part, or that.
Correct.
Yeah, right. But so they 20 to 25 people ish, right? You come, warm food, hot shower, a bed to sleep on, and
Yep.
I think you may have just touched on it. And they stay for how long? Just about a day, because then at the time, most of them it was just a stop. You help them, and they go on their way.
Yeah. So some people, it was literally in and out, and they had transportation. Some people would stay for several days because either A, they didn't know where they were going, or B, the transportation's coming later.
Got it. But that's not the
and so
same
then-
anymore.
No. And so then there was kind of like a second phase of of all of this, was that people no longer had a place to go. Like all the people in the beginning, who all had their contacts and they had transportation, they all got out. And then there's all the other people that are coming on. And then it was interesting because like everybody started coming, because before everybody was coming in cars or being dropped off at the border and then walking across. Then all of that kind of sort of stopped, and then everybody's coming on trains.
Right.
And so then we started driving to the train station, and then all these people had no place to go. They knew nothing about Poland. All they knew was that Warsaw was the capital. They knew nothing. And so literally it was just like, okay, and then we're all the contacts were working. It was like, hey, we have 4 places in Germany. Who wants to go to Germany? And then it was like, or Norway, or all these different places, so all these people like really, I just feel so much for them, because they're leaving their home. They have no idea when they're coming back. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go, but they have to go someplace. And it's mothers and children. It's mothers and children.
Because they want to live.
They want to live.
I can't imagine that.
And so then, so you're there'd be a couple of times where, I usually wasn't the person in charge of, of saying, hey, there's places, there's 4 places here, whatever. But there's a few times that I was, and, they would start asking questions, where? Like there's one place in Germany, they're like, where in Germany? I'm like, I don't know. Will I have an apartment? Will I have a job? Do I have to speak German? Because I don't speak German, and so there's all of these things that they need to know. And
so Kim, I want to take just a moment to for people that might be joining in the middle here to just introduce you. We're talking with Kim Backstrom, who is about 10 miles from the Ukrainian border in Poland, and she's working with a church that is receiving refugees and has been there since the early parts of March, right after the war started. I'm Kirk Anderson, and I'm with Ben Dryden. And Kim's a good friend of mine from back in the college days, and so we've kept up. There are comments. If you want to ask a question or leave a comment for Kim, feel free to do that. I want to talk a little bit about the human aspect of this, because as you talk about, there's millions of refugees that have fled Ukraine now, and many of them have come through Poland. To my understanding, very few of them are men, because the Ukrainian men had to stay back. So you're dealing mostly with women, grandmothers, and children. How is that working for those people that are coming across without their spouses, and what are they able to carry with them, and what kind of condition are they in?
Yeah, so men from the ages of 18 to 60 cannot leave Ukraine. So if there are so in the time that I was there was, I don't know, maybe 10 men that I saw, and that's including teenage boys and some people that are over than 60 years old. And there's probably, the pastor figured there was probably 500 people that came through the church. And I do want to mention one thing, because the last month has been incredibly quiet at the border. So it's been 3 weeks since we've had any new refugees at the church. So it's basically almost stopped. And a lot of Ukrainians are going back. And there's actually millions of Ukrainian refugees in the western part of Ukraine.
Hold on a second. What would you attribute that to? Why? You said they're going back. I don't really keep up on everything that is happening over there, but it isn't finished yet. So why are they going back?
I think because Russia's been pushed out of the north, they're gone, and then also there's lots and lots of people that left the western part of Ukraine, and the western part of Ukraine for the most part has been relatively safe. Lutsk has been hit, 3-4 times in the past 3 months. Lviv has been hit more often. But other than that, if you're from kind of a smaller village around, it's a little bit more relatively safe, so, yeah. And I think sometimes I've heard as well that people are just running out of money,
Right.
They don't have all these people. Anyway, so back to your question. Yeah, so it is all women and children that are crossing the border, and some are able to cross with a few things, like a backpack and a suitcase, but it's not like you got 5 suitcases you're coming with, literally, I remember on day 3 of the war, there was a mom with her 3 boys, and they literally had one bigger suitcase, and each one of them had a backpack. That's all they had. And
That's
some
probably
people
less than we take on vacation.
Exactly. And you got to remember that they were leaving in February and March, and it was cold. It was winter. It's now warm. It's now 70 degrees, so they don't have summer clothes. They don't have flip-flops. They don't have sunglasses. They don't have any of these things. So they weren't, planning to go on a 6-month vacation. But there are some people who cross with nothing. And there is one story of it's an elderly couple, and they are actually living in a house about 40 minutes away from Hrubieszów. And the Polish lady, her and her husband said, we're open, because they had a house for sale, and they're just like, we're opening this house up for Ukrainians to stay, and they stay until the end. And that might mean a year, that might be months and months and months. And anyway, this elderly couple, they're from a city, I think, to the west of Kyiv. And so that's where Bucha and Irpin is, and they've been blasted. And they were in their garden. So I don't remember when they left. It probably was within the first 2 weeks of the war, maybe. And, or maybe, I don't remember, say week 2 of the war. And they were in their garden when all the shelling started to happen real close to them, and they had a car. They literally jumped in their car and they drove to the border. So they had nothing with them. They maybe had their documents with them, because I think all Ukrainians at that time were taking all their documents with them all the time. And there's other people that have crossed the border, and they're just we have nothing with us, and we have no underwear. We need some underwear, and so we've been helping buy clothes, or we did receive a whole bunch of clothes, and so if they were able to find something from there, they would use that. If not, we would just buy clothes for them and stuff.
So when you're dealing with kids and moms or grandparents, are there mental health helps for people that are going through this, that are leaving everything behind? Maybe their village or their towns were bombed, and they saw some terrible things, dead bodies or whatever it is. What are you able to offer them, both from a mental health standpoint, but also on a spiritual level? Are you able to communicate with these folks? Do they speak English, or do they speak any of the Polish language, or is there just that language barrier?
Yeah, so for me, sometimes there have been some people that have spoken English. What I noticed as the war went on, so in April and even into May, more and more people were crossing that did not speak English, and they're further from the east. And what I've noticed is that people further from the east, they speak Russian and Ukrainian. and the people from the West, it's more of like a Ukrainian Polish mix. So I could understand the people from the West a little bit better, but the people from the East, I don't understand. I can't understand. I don't understand them. So if they don't speak English, sometimes it's just through Google Translator, and sometimes it's like a few words. I'm like, okay, I kind of sort of understand a little bit what you're saying. But
Right.
for me, the ones that I was able to communicate with, like, yeah, like I definitely would talk with them and I'd listen to them, I'd hear their stories. And I think as far as, sometimes like when they were crossing, like that there was one lady, I mean, her story is just like unbelievable. Um, she's from Chernihiv, which is northeast of Kiev, so in between Kiev and the Russian border, and they were just being pummeled. And her daughter is on the Ukrainian Olympic weightlifting team, not Olympic, but on the national team. And she was at a training camp, like almost right on the Russian border, and like they were just being shelled crazy in the first several weeks of the war. And she's like, "Mom, we're being shelled," and and so basically her mom finally said to her husband, like, we've got to go get her kids, because her brother was up there as well. And so they drove up there, and all of her friends were just like, you can't go, like, you cannot go. They're like, we have to go get our kids,
Yeah, good
and
luck
we
trying
have
to
to
stop a
rescue
parent
them.
trying to help their children. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. So they drove up there, and so I haven't heard their whole story, but I've heard parts of it. And so they went, and by this time her daughter and son, I don't know how long, but they were living in a basement with a whole bunch of other people. And they, at a certain point, they had lost electricity, so no more electricity. And I think towards the end, like the mom actually lost contact with her kids, because probably their cell phones, battery was dead and whatnot. Um, and so anyway, they finally, like, they went in, they got to the basement, and they're just literally like screaming. She's like, and so the mom was telling me this part, and like I'd already heard part of her story before, so I had an idea what she was talking about. And she's just like, she was like, it was completely dark. It was completely dark. I had my cell phone, I had my flashlight, and there's just rows of people, on mattresses on the floor, and completely dark. And I'm just screaming my kids' names, like, Natalia, Natalia, where are you? Where are you? And finally, two people came up to me, and we couldn't even recognize them right away. And finally, we're like, oh, you're our kids, and they're like, let's go. And as they take off, like, the Russians are continuing to bomb them, and she's just like, there's bombs going on the right side and the left side and behind us, and even I don't know if it's them or somebody else, like, but the Russians were actually shooting at them as well.
Wow.
And but they made it out alive. And I remember when she came to us, and she came to us right when that first wave just kind of ended, and like it just got super, super quiet at the border. And that was already after Buchin and Irpin and all of Kyiv had already been liberated. And she was just crying for days, just crying, and then she would show us pictures, and she's like, here's my house, it's, the windows are all blown out. And then I was talking with Natalie, and she's like, here's my weightlifting gym. It's totally, totally bombed out. And,
Yeah.
so like, what we can do, like, we just listen to them, like, there's nothing we can say. I can't say I understand, because I have no idea. I don't know what it's like to run for my life. I don't know what it's like to hear that siren going off and looking in the sky to say, where's the missile coming from? And I've never seen a missile blown up in front of me. I've seen the videos that everybody's showing them to me. Like, and there's another kid from Chernihiv. There's 6 more people that came to us like 3 weeks ago. And there was a rocket that landed in front of their apartment. It didn't blow up. And then he was filming the day before they left. And there was like this big column of smoke, like kind of off in the distance a little way. So some rocket had hit. And all of a sudden, like, here's this big explosion, like probably just a few hundred meters in front of their house.
Wow.
And this teenage kid is recording this on his phone. And so like, if I can talk with people, I'll talk with them and just listen. And but there's been other people in the church they're phenomenal. Like, we have, I would say Ba'at and Ivana, like they've spent so much time listening to the people. And Ivana's actually Ukrainian. She's from Lutsk. Her husband had been working in Trubeshov in Poland earlier, And so when the war broke out, they finally said, okay, we'll take our family here. And so they've joined us, and they've been a huge blessing. Like
Wow.
every day they're coming and they're talking with the people and hearing their stories. And we actually had a family from Mariupol that had escaped, and this was in the beginning of the war. And I remember sitting in the dining room, in a super small dining room. You can squeeze maybe, I don't know, 15 people in there, and we were talking, and it was just some people, and I saw Ivana come down from upstairs where the people were, and her face was just, I don't know, like just so sad, and just I don't even know how to describe it, just like shocked, And I went up there. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, and I didn't understand her real well, but she's just like, I was just talking with those people from Mariupol.
Mhm.
It's awful what they went through,
Yeah.
and yeah. So, but cool story. Going back to the mom who went to rescue her kids, and so she was with us for several days, and then on Sunday, because obviously they're all staying in church, and if they want to, they can come down to the Sunday church service,
Mhm.
and she came with her kids, and almost through the whole church service, she was just crying,
Mhm.
and then afterwards, later that day, she was talking a lot longer with Bata and Ivana, and it's so great, because they're talking to them about God, and about, they're sharing the gospel with these people, and saying, hey, there's hope in God, even though your whole home might be destroyed. Like with God, there is hope,
Huh.
and God is a rock. He's a foundation.
Do a lot of the people that come across have that faith? Obviously, not knowing much about Poland. As we said at the very beginning of the show, you didn't kind of know where it was, and Kirk and I are like, I don't know. I had to look it up on a map last night. No kidding. So I'm like, well, I know it's next to Ukraine, but honestly, I don't know which side. But when they do come over, is there? So I don't know what the faith is over there, what the predominant faith is. When people come over, do you see God in people in terms of their faith coming over? They're Christians, or is it mostly not, or there's something else, which is perfectly fine. It's everyone's business. But what do you see when they come across, and when they are there, and you are sharing the gospel? Is it received well?
Yeah. So what I'm learning, and I didn't know anything about Ukraine really before the war.
Right.
I had been to Ukraine before, but it had been years ago. So I'm learning that, like, kind of like the western half of Ukraine is fairly strong. Like there's a very strong Christian influence, and very, very godly, and like lots and lots of churches. The eastern side, and I think that's maybe more like, I think it's the Greek Orthodox Church, and they're not as many churches, like as far as Christian churches, uh, and so yeah, there's a mix of people. There's a mix of people who are crossing, who are like, I love the Lord, I believe in Him, I've got hope, even though I'm losing everything. And it doesn't mean, and I'm not saying that it's just these people are all together. Like, no, they're still scared. They're still not knowing what's going to happen. They still miss their home and their family and their churches, and they want to go back. Um, and there's other people who are just like, okay, this is just what I have to do, and yeah, there's some people I think who probably are without hope, and yeah, you get everybody. So
One
yeah.
thing that I think is cool in in the church as a whole is that there's kind of a universal connection through song, and I don't know if so like when we went to a mission trip in Mexico, we sang a lot of the same songs that we would sing, but they would be in Spanish. Um, and so I'm wondering, is there a common denominator that crosses the Ukrainian and Polish border that intersects and allows you to have that commonality as a Christian in the church,
I
or
don't
is it
know.
so different? Is it so
um,
different?
no, I don't think it's so different. I think, yeah, I think, there are some songs, like there are some songs where, like, oh yeah, yeah, we know that song, and there's other songs that the church was singing. They're just like, this is a new song. We don't
Hmm.
know it.
We don't
There
like
was
new
one.
songs.
Yeah. The other thing you got to remember is that like the letters, the Polish letters and the Ukrainian letters are different.
Yeah,
So unless a Ukrainian actually knows Polish, they can't read.
right.
They can't
And
read.
it's too new of a thing to probably have translations on
No,
everything, right?
no.
Like you go to a park in Minneapolis and it's got like 14 different languages for every people group that might come to the park. In a war zone like that, you're relying on the kindness of a finger pointing over there. So
Yeah, and even like with with that as far as the language side of things, like the church, like this was a church, a little itty bitty tiny church that nothing was really, not saying that nothing was happening, but like they didn't have a lot of people coming, and
mhm,
all of a sudden they're being overrun and they're being turned into a refugee center, and so it was like, oh, we should probably put signs up, like even something as simple as throw your toilet paper into the toilet because you don't have to, our plumbing system is different. You
Right.
don't have to throw it into the
right.
garbage
Oh,
can.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden, like you got to put signs up, and then like, okay, this is where the silverware is, and so we now have signs up in the church that are in English and Polish and Ukrainian of like cups, plates, dishes, because it's like there's so many people coming in and out, and it's not like
Hmm.
there's 20 volunteers just to tell you where to get food and stuff like that. So
Right. So, I have a lot of questions that we're just not going to be able to get to at this juncture. But as you look towards going back, because right now you're kind of taking a break from being 10 miles from the border and you're more like 6 hours back at your Polish home, but you're heading back there at some point. How can people back here in the United States pray for you if their faith is to do prayer? How can we support you? Is there a financial way that people are supporting your efforts? And is there an anticipation maybe that it's going to get busier again? Because I don't know if that's good or bad that people are going back or that they're not coming. In a lot of ways, it's like, oh, good, that's great, but we know that Russia hasn't stopped the war. They're just not in certain areas, and that could change. The refugee crisis could potentially get worse. So, are there ways for people to support you and financially? And then, what are your prayer requests for people who would like to pray for what you're doing over there?
yeah, so I would definitely say pray, please, 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 please pray. And like in my opinion, this is just my opinion, is that I think the reason that Russia is doing so badly is because people have been praying.
Hmm.
Because there's been so many stories of just different things, of like, oh, Russian tanks are getting stuck and their soldiers getting lost, and like maybe not happening now, but earlier on, and just
Mhm.
like they're just, yeah, just so many things where just like God's hand is almost like it's against Russia, and so like, yeah, pray for victory for Ukraine. Pray that the Russian army will be completely ineffective, and pray that the Russian army will be convicted of all of the evil that they are doing, because it is flat out evil. It's so wrong what they're doing. It's awful. It's
Yeah.
wicked. And pray for all the Ukrainians that are displaced, because it's hard for them. Like their families are split up. Like I know one family that one mom is in the eastern part of Poland, the dad's still in Ukraine, one daughter's in Norway, and the other daughter's on the western part of
Mhm.
Poland. So like pray for all these Ukrainians. Just to have wisdom and to know what to do, and that their needs will be met, because
Mhm.
pray for us as just everybody that's, for myself, just energy, because it's
Mhm.
exhausting, and just wisdom to know what to do, and what to get involved with, because there's so many things you can do. Like
Mhm.
it's unlimited. Like anybody, you could. It's just there's just so much you could do. I would say pray for the church, the Frugeshuv church as well. Pray for unity, because not everybody is on board.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
so there's some people who are like, why are we helping Ukraine? And yeah, so definitely pray, pray, pray. And it is out of the news in the States, like, so it's but it's still happening, and people are still being killed, and buildings are still being blown up, and so like we still need to keep praying.
I think that's
As
what's
for
interesting here is it does go in that cycle, and we are, we had other news that popped up, and so I've had people say when I told them we were going to do this interview, they're like, "Yeah, we haven't heard anything about this. Why is it out of the news?" And I think that that's just kind of an American tradition that we run to the next story, and what if it bleeds, it leads. But we want to keep that in the forefront because those stories are real. And early on in the pre-days of the war, before anything happened, we had a lot of reporters that would go to people in these cities and say, do you think Russia's going to attack? Do you think? And everybody had this hope, like, no, I don't think they will. They just kept living their lives. They basically didn't change what they were doing until it happened. And now many of those people honestly are widows because their husband had to stay back, and there's so many Ukrainians that have been killed. And that's heartbreaking, right? That's really heartbreaking. So it's changed the landscape. And I don't think in America, where we haven't had a war since 1864 on our land, that we can truly understand the devastation of what's happening in Europe in 2022. It's been 70 plus years since World War II, and we've had these smaller conflicts, but we see them on our phone, little 1-minute snippets, and these people are experiencing it, and this will affect them for decades. So how can people support you financially, or the ministry there? Is there a fund that's set up if someone is watching this and they say, I'd like to give $5 or $20 or $1,000? How can people help you? Because there are costs to this, obviously.
Yeah. And so there's two different ways. One is I did set up a PayPal account. And so you can send it through that. It's kimb.par@gmail.com. And whatever money comes, like it's being used for buying food, and because there's actually Ukrainians. We're connected with the Ukrainian church in Lutsk, and they've been coming for, I think, since like the third week of the war, and they're buying food because they're helping refugees in their area. So they're giving food up to like 200 families. So each week they come and they probably buy around $3,000 worth of food, and they go back. We're also, doctor's visits and gas, just to drive around, and paying for apartments and different things like that. So, or I can go to the church, which I could probably get you guys the website as well, because they do have a PayPal account.
Yeah, if you could send it to us, or send it to Kirk, and then we'll put it in the comments right about this time, actually, at however far in, so around the 50-second mark, we'll put it in the comments, so then people they'll have something if they're watching, because most people watch these things later, so then it'll be right there. So if you can send it to us, I'd be more than happy to share that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Kim, as we close down and kind of just give us a final thought on, what you're doing or what you'd like to see. What's on your heart?
I don't know if I have a final thought, to be totally honest. I guess for me is like I've been really blessed. I've been really blessed by all of this. Like, totally wasn't planned at all. It's been incredibly hard. It's been one of the hardest things I think I've ever done in my life. But I don't want to go back, and I want to keep helping. And there's so much to be done. Like,
to be clear, go back. You mean North Dakota?
No, go back to my old life in Poland. To be totally honest.
Oh, sure.
And
wow.
And yeah. I don't know what's happening yet, but there's just so much opportunity, and most I think most importantly is just that, maybe this is my final thought, is even though what Putin is doing and what the Russians are doing is absolutely horrible, God is doing so much good.
And he does his best work in
Yeah.
those situations. So no kidding. Bless you.
Yeah.
For everything that you're doing. And no kidding, we, at least in our house, will be praying for you, for energy, wisdom, for the church, and for unity that you had mentioned earlier. At the very beginning of the show, you said that you went over on a missions trip and you kind of didn't really want to go, right? It was just kind of a check in the box. You know, God said, okay, he's put in my heart, fine, I'll go. And you went over there 1 week and you were a kid. Well, you were young. I mean, you still are young, but this was a while ago. This is younger. And now you're going through what you're going through. Do you look back now and go, yeah, I really regret that. I totally should not have gone there. Or you look back and go, thank you, Lord.
Yeah, it's definitely look back and be like, God, your plan is better than mine. Like you knew what was best. And yeah.
Awesome.
You could have been in Ireland.
I could have been.
Yeah. Kirk, thank you so much for getting this all set up.
Yeah.
And Kim, you are welcome back on anytime. And actually, let's make sure we do this again in a couple of months or when things, hopefully this won't be getting worse. Right, that situation.
The end of the war.
And we'll be having you back on to talk about other things, but still on this same general topic. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. A special thank you to our guest today, Kim Backstrom, for joining us to share her story live from Poland. For Kirk Anderson and DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden saying thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.